This conference will now be recorded.
Thank you for joining us today. We'll make this webinar available online using all procurement materials. If you could please mute your phones, that would be much appreciated. The chat feature is active, so there's time for Q&A at the end using the chat feature. This is not going to replace any question and answers during the actual procurement, and all of this will be available through the procurement materials afterward. With that, I'm going to turn it over to our Executive Director, Whit Blanton. Okay, Whit.
Okay, here I am.
Yep.
Let's see. Operator error. There we go. All right. Okay, there we go. All right, I just want to give a quick overview and introduction to Ford Pinellas, our agency, and what we're trying to accomplish. Some of you may know about us, others may not. We were formed in 2014 by a special act of the legislature to create a single governing board in Pinellas County for countywide land use planning and the Metropolitan Planning Organization, or countywide transportation planning. And our goal is to coordinate and implement land use and transportation planning in an integrated manner to make good, sound decisions for the county and its 24 municipalities. And of course, we also play a role in shaping transportation priorities for the Tampa Bay urbanized area that has the Pasco, Pinellas, and Hillsborough MPOs. And we've really tried to take a more strategic countywide focus for the redevelopment aspects of Pinellas County, because we're essentially a developed county, economic growth and opportunity, and the continuing development of our multimodal transportation network. Our mission is to align resources and plans that help to achieve a compelling vision for Pinellas County, our individual communities, and our region. This past year, we adopted a new long-range transportation plan called Advantage Pinellas that will guide our investment and supportive redevelopment for the next 25 years. This follows our community's priorities that were articulated very clearly through a lot of surveys and outreach, that people are really interested in safety and access, walkable communities. We have an extensive trail network in Pinellas County, and improving transit service that connects our region and our communities. Pinellas is Florida's most densely developed county, and because of the lack of vacant land and that most everything we do is redevelopment, we really have to plan differently to make sure that we guide growth in the right area. So we need a lot of different tools, a lot of different measures, and doing things a little bit differently than some of the surrounding counties and really what a lot of counties in Florida deal with. One of the things that we asked the board to do back in 2015 was to provide some strategic direction on how we go about our planning and some things that we really need to focus on. And so we established what are called the strategic planning and operations topics, or spotlight emphasis areas, and the board selected 3, and those endure still almost 5 years later. Defining a vision for the US 19 corridor, which is a major source of transportation investments over the last several years. But we need to think about land use and transportation within that corridor. It's a prime north-south artery connecting Pasco and Pinellas. Enhancing beach community access is the second emphasis area. We have 15 million tourists coming to Pinellas County, and we have some outstanding communities along the beach. And we need to get workers to their jobs, and we need to get visitors and tourists to and from their destinations. Finally, the last emphasis area was to develop a master plan for the Gateway Mid-County area. We undertook that effort with funding from our local government partners and the State Department of Transportation. And that master plan is nearly complete. We had a draft plan delivered this past year. And we are now in a review and refinement mode. And over the next year, we will be focusing on implementing that master plan. So it's not just a document that's on a shelf, but it is a living document that guides activities in the Gateway area. A big thing that we accomplished in 2019 was focusing on the need for additional funding for transportation investments in Pinellas County. And last January, we had a workshop with about 150 people and about 100 elected officials on the transportation funding dilemma that we face. We have declining fund balances for our transportation trust fund at the county level, and our transit agency is facing, it's at its millage cap and facing a revenue shortfall in the next several years. So there was consensus broadly that we needed to explore transportation funding options. And in working with the Pinellas County government and our transit agency, Pinellas Suncoast Transit Authority, we've worked to incorporate into our long-range plan a series of investment corridors shown on the map here on this slide. And those transit investment corridors are really a mechanism for linking our workforce and housing opportunities through transportation. And these corridors have been identified to connect people to job training opportunities, jobs, and to get people throughout the region. This past year, we've also embarked on a countywide housing strategy. And that housing strategy is starting with a select few communities that are receiving funds for housing, but it'll be broadened to the entire county for a countywide housing compact. And funds set aside in the Penny for Pinellas in 2017 have been earmarked for affordable housing and for economic development through our Penny for program. And the criteria for how to spend those funds does consider these investment corridors as priority areas for that investment. So this is now policy, and we are going to be looking at the possibility of a transportation funding referendum potentially later this year, assuming the Board of County Commissioners puts that on the ballot. But in the meantime, we know that we need to continue to plan for the redevelopment of these corridors. These are largely commercial corridors that have a lot of redevelopment opportunity. And they are also out of the coastal high hazard area for the most part, so they can support additional density and intensity. And so that corridor planning will begin in earnest this year to look at not only the redevelopment potential and transit investment, but also how we go about in ensuring that the private sector plays a significant role in providing that housing through regulatory reform. And that'll take a lot of different forms, from parking to other forms. And then we need to continue strengthening our regional partnerships, working with the other MPOs in our region, the Tampa Bay Area Transit Authority, the Regional Planning Council, who all have a role to play, along with the Florida Department of Transportation, in how we get our transportation network built stronger and better. So just broadly, our 2020 priorities are to focus on this issue of transportation funding and making sure that those dollars are spent wisely and for the right projects and where we can leverage the most resources at the local and state and federal level. The countywide housing compact that I mentioned earlier, where we recognize that housing is a lot more expensive in a redeveloping area, and we need to come up with some strategies to lower that cost and provide additional housing options for people. And then finally, resilience. As a county with nearly 600 miles of coastline or waterline, we are extremely vulnerable to rising sea levels, to stronger storms and storm surge. And so we've been embarking on a lot of work over the last year to really look at where's our best opportunity and our most necessary investments for resilience. So there's a lot on our plate this year, and I just wanted to broadly lay that out. And finally, how we're going to get it done. We have a great board of 13 members. They're very engaged, provide good policy direction. What you're seeing here is our new organization chart. We're still working toward it a little bit, but this is our plan going forward. And I think it's helpful just to show that we have a countywide plan responsibility. We have MPO core functions that we're responsible for. We undertake a series of special projects around the county, and we do a lot of technical assistance with our 25 local governments. And then we provide data analytics, GIS, mapping, visualization. And this year, we are going to be seeking approval from the board to add a planning position and undertake work on these corridors to really look at our policy, economics, and design for each one of our investment corridors. Obviously not all at once, but we'll be phasing those in. And then we're seeking another position for grants and partnerships. And I show this just because we are not two separate legal entities. I mean, we are two separate legal entities, but we don't want to function that way. We want to function as a single unified organization. And I think this organization chart begins to get us there. And all of these functions really revolve around the area of transit planning integration. We're not necessarily the transit service planning agency or the regional transit planning agency, but we are the ones that's responsible for land use supportive development or transit supportive development, and focusing on communicating and engaging all of our partners in how we go about that transformation of Pinellas County. So I just wanted to give this overview and look forward to the submittals, and I'll turn it back over to our staff.
Thank you, Whit. And now we'll turn it over to Rodney Chapman to talk a little bit more about this.
Thanks, Sarah. I'll spend the next few minutes to give you an overview of some of the land use planning activities that we may undertake in the next several years. I'll start first by talking about GIS and analytics. It's something that our staff has become quite capable with here for the last few years. We have worked with our local governments to use these Esri-based tools to tell a story using data in a different way than just numbers and charts. But we feel that there's another step in what we can provide to our partners, and it deals with visualization in a three-dimensional manner. Pinellas County has invested a lot of money in the Arc Urban platform. It's a three-dimensional GIS tool that is relatively new on the market, and we are currently using it for some visioning work we're doing in the city of Indian Rocks Beach. Pinellas County has been gracious enough to actually build the 3D model for Indian Rocks Beach for us, and we're using it to convey certain aspects of planning to the city leaders in that beach community. What we want to do going forward is to, it has the capability of actually taking building models sort of through platforms like SketchUp and others, and placing those buildings on the ground physically within the model, so you can see the usefulness when it comes to things like scenario planning or development possibilities. This Arc Urban tool can become very, very powerful. In that same vein, in terms of architectural renderings, form-based codes, and site planning, here in Pinellas County, we feel like that is the next step in the evolution of land use planning. We're seeing some of our local governments get more comfortable and actually adopt and implement form-based codes that are really more graphic than in the past. And it's being done to help convey to the citizens and the community members that that change can be positive, and helping them visualize different outcomes based on new codes and new standards. So firms that have experience and expertise in form-based codes, the ability to take a particular site and apply various zoning standards and regulations and plan for different outcomes will be of use to us here at Fort Pinellas. As for target employment and mixed-use development, in a nutshell, Pinellas County does have limitations on the conversion of certain types of land. This goes back to a study that was done in the mid-2000s dealing with target employment and industrial land preservation, so that Pinellas County would not become a bedroom county. And so those policies on converting that land are still in place. But what we've seen through things like the Gateway Master Plan development is that some of those policies could limit the implementation of the vision that included in that Gateway Master Plan. And so we've started to begin a conversation with Pinellas County Economic Development about that right mix of uses and really what mechanisms could we start to think about that would allow some of this land to be converted to other uses that support those high wage employers. So firms that have expertise in that area, it would be beneficial to us. Also, local governments have approached us about, often approach us about traffic impacts associated with development projects. Even though concurrency has been repealed at the state level, some local governments still have it as one of their review criteria or things to consider. And the truth is sometimes the planners or engineers that are reviewing these traffic impact analyses aren't the best equipped to do that. And so there could be an opportunity for a firm to provide some on-call services to review traffic impact analyses for particular projects, as well as assist in perhaps the development of transportation management plans to mitigate any impacts. Whit mentioned this earlier, but the resiliency and climate hazard space we're wading into pretty thoroughly. We did complete a regional vulnerability assessment of the transportation network with our other joining NPOs here recently. We feel like we have a pretty good handle on the transportation impacts of these climate hazards, but one of the things that was unaddressed through the study was the land use impacts. And so there was an acknowledgement that while you can do things like raise the road profile or implement soft shoreline stabilization techniques, that doesn't do a lot to deal with the private property impacts of climate hazards. So firms that have some expertise or exposure to that would be attractive to us. We also are working with our locals to deal with the redevelopment challenges faced by the expansion of the coastal high hazard area boundaries. It's now encompassing more of certain parts of our communities that really have targeted those areas for growth and redevelopment. So we've begun a conversation with our local government partners and the Department of Emergency Management to talk about strategies to mitigate allowing people to live in these more vulnerable areas, but having sort of a trade-off by making that allowance. Probably as most of you know, Pinellas County has a lot of golf courses. We have about 36 golf courses around the county. And nationally, the industry is seeing a decline in golf course participation rates, which in turn lead to the revenue that the golf course would incur. And with the lack of revenue, it is forcing some courses to close. We have a few in Pinellas County that you may have seen in the paper that are going through various degrees of planned redevelopment. And one thing we could tackle over the next few years is to look at, if you do allow a golf course to redevelop, what are some of the best practices so that there is more community buy-in when these golf courses redevelop into other uses. Whit mentioned this as well. We have been a partner with Pinellas County and some of the other entitlement communities to look at workforce housing. We are working towards a countywide housing strategy, and we'll be holding a summit later this year to tackle the issue further. And so firms that have experience in identifying and implementing strategies to make housing more affordable to all income levels would be of interest to us. We also last year did work with Creative Pinellas and the communities along the northern part of Alternate 19 to find to gauge the interest in developing a plan to make arts and culture more of a prominent presence along the Alt 19 corridor. We did identify issues and opportunities last year, and we'd be looking to advance that effort into a phase 2 where we get more detailed in strategy and identify strategies and mechanisms that can strengthen the presence of arts and culture along Alternate 19. And now I'll turn it over to Chelsea.
So on the MPO side of things, I'm just going to briefly cover some of the upcoming activities that we have planned for the next couple of years. We did just adopt our long-range transportation plan going out to 2045, as Whit had mentioned earlier. So now we're pivoting to a few other activities, probably the biggest of which is going to be the congestion management process. We have not updated the methodology for this in several years. So we would like to conduct a countywide screening for congestion management process projects. We do have a set aside of funding to advance projects that are identified through this process, but we also want to take a look at the policies and the procedures that we document our process with and update that. So what we're going to really be looking for are some innovative approaches and some technical support from a consulting firm to help us update the CMP. We're also going to be looking to advance and develop an integrated performance report. We currently are reporting on the federal highway performance measures and targets through our TIP, our long-range plan, and then on an annual basis, we also put out a countywide trends and conditions report that really screens the entire network from both a land use and a transportation perspective. There's a lot of overlap between these, but they're not completely the same. So what we're going to be looking to do is to develop a single consistent reporting mechanism to address all transportation and land use measures that we currently have, and then to expand on those measures going forward to help us track how we're implementing the long-range plan. So again, we'll be looking for any innovative approaches and additional technical support. There we go. And then pivoting off that, we're looking to create a dashboard for our website. It doesn't have to be housed on our website. It could be housed elsewhere. But this image here is really an example of the federal dashboard for each of the state's performance measures. We're going to be looking for something similar, but maybe a little bit more visually appealing and public-friendly that can be easily updated with the most recent data on an ongoing basis so that we can report out on our current progress towards the set targets where applicable. Some of our measures aren't going to have set targets, but we will want to be showing kind of our progress along on each of those measures. And then finally, we'll also be, Whit had touched on this, with the adoption of our Advantage Pinellas plan, we did identify transit investment corridors, and these are the corridors where we're going to be investing future transit revenues to enhance service. So now that we know where these corridors are, we're going to have to take each one and conduct a corridor study along it to identify the appropriate land use and transportation strategies, and really making sure those are in place in advance of any future premium transit investment. So our plan right now is to start with one corridor at a time, probably in later 2020, and then start working our way through. And also, for complete streets, our agency does not have a complete streets policy because we are not an implementing agency. We thought it would be a best approach to fund complete streets projects that supported the local plans of our various local agencies. So we do award up to $100,000 annually to our local partners to create complete street concept plans. This is a competitive grant program. We're actually in our 4th year of funding for it right now. We do require that those being awarded funds use one of our consultants. So our consultants that we do move forward with should make themselves available to conduct these complete streets concept plans over the next few years.
Great. Thank you, Rodney and Chelsea. At this point, that concludes our presentation. We do have some time for question and answers. If you have any questions, feel free to type them in the chat box. As I mentioned earlier, this is being recorded, and so it will be available online with the other procurement materials. And if you are interested in joining our procurement email list, please contact me at skaper@forwardpinellas.org. That, I'll give a couple minutes just to see if anyone has any questions. If not, that's all that we have today. We did get a question about when and where the materials will be posted. I can't announce the date. You will get an email from us if you join our procurement email list, and all materials are posted on our website and on DemandStar. We got a question about the priority project list available to the public. We have priority lists for projects that go in our TIP. We also have our own internal documents for our agency's work. That is available in our Unified Planning Work Program, which we are developing right now, and a draft of that is scheduled to go before our board in March. I'll give one more chance for questions. Okay, well, not seeing any. Thank you all very much for your time, and please send us an email if you would like to be included in our list. Thank you. Oh, one last question on the schedule. That will be in the procurement materials, so please take a look for that. Okay, thank you, everyone.